If you had to guess, how many Americans do you think have listened to a podcast? Maybe surprisingly, about half of Americans have listened to a podcast, and 20% claim they listen to one almost daily. Podcasts are a great way to entertain oneself or even learn some new information. They are incredibly mentally stimulating, with a perhaps profound effect on the future, especially when looking at the influences of AI. Stay tuned as we break down the past, present, and future of podcasts. Today's episode will be broken up into the following sections: a brief history and how they became the media we know and love today, then the modern-day significance supported by Jack Gollant's study, and finally we'll offer our projections for the future of podcasting. Keep listening and we'll fill you in on all things podcasts.
First, let's get into what a podcast is. A podcast is a talk radio series on demand which can be uploaded to YouTube directly through a website or published via audio files on a podcast hosting service.
Audio podcasts are made up of pre-recorded episodes that users can listen to on various devices. You can subscribe to podcasts distributed through podcast hosting platforms. Podcasts come as a series of episodes, each discussing a specific topic. Some follow a chronological story, while others are standalone episodes featuring interviews and discussions. Podcasts cover a wide range of topics, catering to diverse interests and preferences. Genres include crime, sports, and technology. Most podcasts feature one or more hosts who guide the episode, provide commentary, and lead the discussion. Podcasts adopt a conversational tone, creating an intimate and engaging listening experience, which offer listeners the convenience of consuming content on their own schedule, as they can be paused, resumed, or replayed at any time.
The most popular podcast platforms are YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, with YouTube being the most popular at 33%. People listen to podcasts to learn about a topic, stay up to date with current events, entertainment, laughter, or just wanting something to listen to while multitasking. Let's get into the history of podcasts. In 1895, an Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi invented the radio. In the early 1980s, the phrase audio blogging surfaced as a term. It was a term that suggested sharing thoughts and experiences with other people via audio recording. Audio blogging was the original term for what is now known as podcasts. In 1993, Carl Malamud launched the first computer radio talk show, Internet Talk Radio. In the early 2000s, audio blog posts were developed by David Weiner and Christopher Lydon. David Weiner, who is a software developer, created a technology known as RSS, which means really simple syndication. The technology allows the audience to receive website updates and distribute audio content. Christopher, who is a radio presenter and journalist, joined David Weiner in developing audio blogs. He began collaborating with individuals in interviews and made his website easily accessible. In October 2001, Apple launched its first portable music player called the iPod. It allowed for the transferring of audio blogs to an audio player as an MP3 file. In July 2003, Christopher Lydon recorded the first open source interview episode. It was the first podcast ever made specifically for podcasting. In 2004, Adam Curry, who previously worked at MTV, and Dave Slusher, who is a software developer, started using RSS enclosures to spread audio files. The term podcasting was developed. In 2004, Adam, Christopher, and David were credited with the invention of podcasting, launching the first ever modernized podcast to be developed. Adam Curry and David Weiner coded a program known as the iPodder, enabling users to download audio blogs to their iPod. Ben Hammersley writes in the Guardian newspaper an article about the term podcasting as a result of the invention of the iPodder. The word iPodder combines the word iPod and broadcast. In October 2004, the first ever podcast service provider, Liberated Syndication, launched. In November 2004, the first official podcast feed was launched for the inauguration day of George W. Bush when he became president of the United States. In June 2005, Apple iTunes 4.9 software was released and allowed users to download and subscribe to podcasts without additional software. In 2005, Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, introduced podcast subscriptions. When podcasts were first released, more than 3,000 podcasts were available to audience listeners, which grew to over 1 million podcast subscriptions within 2 days. By 2016, Apple had 10 billion podcast downloads. By the end of 2021, Apple Podcasts increased their variety of genres for podcasts to over 2 million, 28 million registered users, and 7.8 million new episodes offered.
Now let's take a look at podcasts and their present-day impact. Surveys suggest that in 2022, 62% of Americans ages 12 and over claim to have listened to at least one podcast. In 2021, 57% of Americans 12 and over listened, and 10 years ago that figure was only 29%. A lot of Americans enjoy listening to podcasts, but have you ever wondered what happens to your brain as you listen? Jack Gallant answers this for us, claiming that our brains hum with activity. Gallant took a sample of individuals and gave them a series of podcast episodes to listen to while recording their brain activity. He noticed that specific parts of the brain lights up when we hear specific things. You could be listening to an episode about cancer research or catching up on the latest Smartless episode. Either way, your brain is humming and stimulated. This begs the question, are there topics that elicit more brain activity than others? Gallant says yes, and that would be something like a murder. If you've studied media, your ears might perk up, as Gallant is perhaps speaking to the concept of mean world syndrome. Mean world syndrome describes the effect of being immersed in negative information. If someone is surrounded by these kinds of messages, they tend to think that the world is more dangerous than it actually is, and might even seek that kind of information out more.
We all have a fear of the unknown, a fact that might be all the more true for podcast hosts. The rise of AI will likely have a significant impact on the podcast industry. On one side, AI will revolutionize your podcasting experience. With personalized content algorithms, it takes customization to a whole new level, from choosing your preferred voice to selecting topics and even countries. Editing podcasts can be a real-time burner for podcasters, right? But AI can recognize specific words, emotional expressions, and voices, making editing a breeze. Spending less time on manual tasks, making the process cost-effective, and more time spent on making content. Something podcasts have been missing is the interaction between the listener and the host. Thanks to the natural language processing, listeners can engage with AI robots and interactive conversation that podcasts lack. AI's accessibility feature can create subtitles, making podcasts more inclusive for individuals with hearing impairments. But here's the catch. It's a game changer, but it also brings increased competition. However, with a little creativity and staying ahead of the curve, podcast hosts can use AI to their advantage, embracing the ever-changing information and delivering content that stands out from the crowd. After hearing about the statistics, history, impact, and future of podcasts, are you surprised that half of America has been captivated by a podcast at least once? Where do you lie in the majority of Americans that listen to regularly, or have you yet to discover your podcast journey?